Hello, EGF community. Welcome to our first episode of EGF Leads. Today, we are going to be talking about marketing your team and esports program. So this is our very first episode. We're really excited for you to join us. But EGF Leads was designed as a 9-week program that we're going to be doing where we're going to be exploring different topics in the esports community and esports industry with different university leaders and industry experts. So we'll be here every single week, every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, talking with different folks about those different topics. So to kick things off this week, we thought it would be a great opportunity for us to talk with you all about marketing your team and esports program. Throughout the session today, we've got a number of different questions prepared and ready to go to ask our panelists. But if you have any questions, you're also free to post them in the comment section, and we can pull them into our live stream and ask them live. So we will go ahead and get started though, but my name's Courtney. Again, I'm going to be serving as the moderator for today. I serve as the director for student involvement in esports at DePaul University. So we will start and introduce some of our panelists. So Eric, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Courtney. My name is Eric Kaymeyer. I'm the director of esports and gaming technology at Butler University. We are a small private institution in Indianapolis with around 4,500 students. Our participation base is we have 2 varsity titles which compete in the Big East, and then we have around 13 other titles on the club levels that are participating. And so we appreciate giving us time today to kind of really highlight our program and the growth that we've seen over the last 2 to 3 years.
Great. Thanks for being here, Eric. Kevin, I'll turn it over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Courtney. My name is Kevin. I am currently the COO and co-founder at GGLeagues. But, you know, kind of my background in the esports space, I was with DePaul University, kind of in the DePaul esports infancy, and helped really build that program, and kind of, you know, providing the students with a new era of, you know, support and being able to build that program there. And so that was really exciting. I was also able to kind of transition to working with TESPA, where I was able to work with you know, a number of colleges around the country to really help grow their programs as well. And that kind of transitions into where I am today, which, you know, we work to kind of build programs with other recreation agencies across the country. So really kind of lending insights here is going to be awesome, and, you know, excited to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, Kevin. And Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Dixon. I am the CMO and co-founder of the GameHERS. That's GameHERS. And we are a social networking and media platform for women who game, women, non-binary, femme-identifying, and all marginalized genders. We've launched about a year ago and have grown to a really robust community over that time on all of our social channels. We hosted the GameHER Awards in the fall, where we honored a number of women in both esports, collegiate, the gaming world, cosplay, kind of all of it. And our mission is, you know, to provide a safe space, a place for women who game to connect. That will culminate later this year in our app. And I'm really excited to be here today. Well, college is a huge initiative for us in terms of meeting college women who game. We are just about to launch a college chapter program, and we're still actually determining exactly what that's going to look like. And so basically, we have a lot of resources to support women who game and all the topics that come up with that. So super excited to be here. And again, Rebecca at the GameHERS. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Rebecca. And to wrap things up, Bill.
Thanks, Courtney. Hi, everyone. I am Bill Newton. I'm the Assistant Director for Campus Activities here at Niagara University up in Niagara Falls, New York. And our small school, about a little bit under 3,000 students, about half live on campus, and some are obviously remote this year, more than normal. And I oversee administratively our esports program. Our program's about 2 years old, also pretty small, but we're a healthy competitor in the EGF with about 4 titles in there. And then we've got 2 or 3 other teams more at the club level, local level, I guess you could say. So I'm excited to be here today. Certainly we've put a lot of work into our program to get it marketed, to get it up and out to our students and even out in the local community and in the local media outlets. So I'm happy to be here today.
Great. Well, thank you all. So for our viewers, we're going to be talking about really 4 buckets or 4 areas and having some conversation and dialogue around those. So our areas are starting up, brand identity, audience, and then tips and tricks for everyday management. So, no better place to start than starting up. I know a lot of our, potentially our student leaders who are watching, and even some of our administrators may be still trying to figure out how to get things rolling and how to start marketing your team and program. So Kevin, I'm going to direct this first question to you. But when you began marketing, your team or program, what were some of the initial elements you considered?
So super excited about this question. This is something that, I feel like is one of the toughest pieces, especially in starting kind of a program, and then also starting to really develop a plan to take to market and be able to have that brand identity. And so for me and kind of when we were looking into DePaul Esports and all of those things is how can we really learn about the community that we have first piece there, right? How can we start talking to students? And so I spent a lot of time just really learning from all the different, students that are competing, students that wanted to be involved in what are some of the things that really drive students to, be gravitated towards this. And so I'm not the one that, knows all the answers there. And so I really love relying on, kind of other people who might have those insights to be able to help there. And so my first piece was really learning from all the other student groups. And so DePaul was unique in the sense that it had multiple student organizations around specific games. And so like the League of Legends Club, the Rocket League Club. But the real big piece was how do we bring them all together in a cohesive unit and make sure that brand is able to be shown in a light where it's still uplifting all the different organizations, but it's still one voice. And so that was the big piece on how we kind of looked at it, from the start. And then the second piece is how do we, choose the right areas to be able to market to the community, to be able to bring in students. Those channels are a little bit different. And so using, platforms like Reddit and Twitch and Twitter are more geared towards, the student aspect. But then when you're looking at how do you start, getting more parents to understand your new program, you're looking at more YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and those types of platforms. So really just understanding the breadth of different, platforms, especially, I feel like that grows overnight. And so just making sure that, for us at, DePaul Esports and kind of how we continued that brand was to make sure that we were as strategic as possible without, overloading with too many platforms, and then making sure that our brand was consistent at the same time. So that's kind of how we started on our side. Yeah.
I can jump in. So the GameHERS just started about a year ago. And while we're not an esports program at a college, I think that the way you start up a community, which we have done, it has some things in common to that. And the most important thing by far that we did when we first started our community is to listen to the very early adopters and our very similar to some things that Kevin just mentioned. But as we grew a Discord community super quickly. We have 3,000 women in our Discord now. It's the place where we get the most feedback from everywhere that we exist on Instagram and on Twitter. By the way, if you want to find us anywhere, we're always at the GameHERS on every platform. But so I think listening to the people who have already joined the community right from the start is the most important thing. And that's exactly kind of why I'm here today and why I'm interested to learn from all the other panelists and to share the information that I have, because collaborating and networking and seeing kind of what the community that exists already wants is the most important thing in order to move forward. So I'll just add that in.
Yeah, for us at Niagara, I kind of took a look at starting up at probably like a 2-phase operation. For one, first of all, for me, not knowing the first thing about esports, so I had to take a hard deep dive with a couple of our core students and getting a first-hand education, right? But then it was, as Kevin said, and even Rebecca, getting to know our student community, our population, where were their interests, and where can we meet them, and how can we develop this program together? Just like a lot of our coming from the campus activities person and at a university, all of our clubs are student driven. They're not, hey, I want to start a fishing club today, so I'm going to push it out to everybody. No, it comes from student interest and student driven, but once we had that and we had a good core group of students ready to go, then it was really taking it to the next level and meeting with a lot of our campus administrators and people of influence here on our campus to help our program expedite pretty quickly. We went from 7 or 8 students to, for us, 50, 60, 70 students, a dedicated space on campus. Those things don't just happen overnight at a university. So we were able to get some good face time with some administrators, some VPs, our president, and just how esports as a title, as a general, is still trending up, and that we need to be a part of it. Otherwise, we're going to miss out. And so that's really helped us grow pretty quickly.
Yeah, I would also reflect some of what Bill has shared from a university's perspective. Universities tend to roll a little slower than most, and so being able to influx that amount of information in this space, because it's so fast growing, not only from our internal constituents, but those externally, whether it's operations they're running gaming centers already, or if it's game developers, if it's the governance groups, the ones that have a vested interest in this space. And you got to take everything with a grain of salt and be able to make sure it fits into your dynamic that you want to cultivate on your campus. And so we really did a lot of info deep digging in the community here in Indianapolis, but across the US, to really kind of understand what does the landscape look like at each one of these institutions. And we know that we're not an East Coast or a West Coast university. We're here in the Midwest. And how can we advance this and be a leader here in the Midwest? And so we took what we learned. We really tried to understand what our faculty were doing in this space, and then bring our students in, and then cultivate a unified pillar system, which some institutions you've probably seen already out there have, around community, competition, and curriculum. And so what it did for us in a marketing is it unified our marketing from each one of those branches, and we all could come together and really focus on what fits and how our brand can be shadowed. And I can talk a little bit more about how we did that then with an actual brand identity component. But it really was important for us to get the collective campus around that, so that we could share a common message and not be fractioned across campus.
Mm-hmm. Well, Eric, I think that's a great transition, because I'm hearing themes from all of your answers about the true value of, one, having those initial conversations so that you understand what your community is, what they want, and then two, really meeting them where they are, right? Like Rebecca talked about Discord. I know Kevin talked about being on Reddit and being in the places, and Twitter, and maybe not posting everything to Facebook, because that's our students aren't necessarily there. So finding those places and truly meeting students where they are, I think is really critical for people as they start thinking out. Because the thing that's interesting about this conversation too, that in listening to you all, we didn't necessarily talk about the importance of understanding every element of a game, right? Or every element of something. We talked about this big picture component. And I think that actually transitions nicely to the next topic in our conversation here around brand identity, and how important, and Rebecca, I direct this to you to kick things off, because I know the GameHERS had a really strong strategy around this initially. How important is brand identity when you start to market and promote your team or program?
So it's super important. And, it is a great transition from the last question, because as you're starting up, you have to already be thinking about that, right? And I think all four of us talked about, when you're developing a brand identity at the beginning, you need to reach out to your early adopters and your early signups and get their feedback. I think the best way I can describe how we look at brand identity is this. When we started the GameHERS, we wanted to create a community, a platform that amplifies and celebrates and creates a place for women who game, right? And so we're certainly not the first organization or group of people in the gaming industry who are addressing this topic. And in fact, many organizations who are already doing it are doing awesome things. When we first joined, we made a lot of connections and relationships with a lot of the various nonprofits who we still work with and support. I mean, luckily when you're talking about the situation of women in gaming, I think everybody pretty much agrees that it's great that we're talking about it and trying to sort of make everything more inclusive and opportunities better. What I think we needed to do is figure out, okay, what is our brand identity and what place are we going to play that's different than already exists? And so what we ended up deciding to do is say, and this, by the way, was after thousands of interviews with women who game, women all over the spectrum who game, professionals, streamers, casual gamers, etc. The toxicity and the harassment and all of that, yes, that exists, and that is not good. And that is one of the reasons we're creating an app where women can find each other safely, and that's important. What we actually found, though, is that the women who game as a whole want to talk about all the awesome, wonderful things that are happening in their lives because of gaming. Maybe it helped them deal with a stressful situation, with a mental health problem. Maybe it was something that was the main driver between how they collaborated and communicated with their friends. Maybe it was a way to get out of a not so great living situation at home. Whatever the great parts about gaming and the good things that gaming provided in their life, that's what the majority of women we talked to wanted to do. So we said, okay, we're going to make a brand identity around a positive experience for women in gaming. Certainly not that we're not going to address the negative issues that need to be addressed, but that's our brand identity. Now we also continue to research, continue to poll our community, continue to try different things. And as we strategize and work with different partners in the industry, and as we talk to many people in the college esports world, that will always be evolving. But I think, establishing a brand identity early on and always being open to the community to change it is probably the best advice that I could give you for my team.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a lot of really cool points there, which it reminds me a lot of, kind of when DePaul Esports was kind of forming and kind of looking at like how we can help, get the brand identity kind of streamlined. And, there's a lot of conversations around like, what are the core values? What is everything that, especially like DePaul University, like making sure that you're aligning with the college values to make sure that, everything that you're doing, everything you're portraying and showing is also falling in line with the university, because the last thing you'd want is an esports organization that does not reflect, the university and the university's type of mentality. And so that was like the biggest one for us at the very beginning. And then, for me, when kind of looking at, we had, the League of Legends community and the Rocket League community, all those different communities, how do we help, synergize with them without taking the voice away from the students, but still being able to provide that like singular brand that overarches kind of like all those different student organizations. And I feel like that was probably, one of the hardest, pieces to kind of crack. But even looking back and seeing kind of like how DePaul Esports is still evolving and growing, it's really cool to see that, DePaul Esports as a brand is in a larger umbrella over all these student organizations, but all those student organizations, in terms of like the different club teams and different teams around it, are still able to have their own voice and still fit with that brand identity. And so making sure that, both the overarching brand and then also the maybe sub brands, if you want to think of it that way, are still in line with each other. And so that way your League of Legends team is portraying the same values and the same, type of mentality as your, Rocket League and your Overwatch team. So that was the big piece for us as well.
Well, and Kevin, I think that gets me thinking about how I think in particular colleges and universities have to adapt their brand identity as a member of a university community, right? Like and it actually, I think one of the schools that I think does it exceptionally well is Butler, Eric. So kudos to your team. But Butler has done a great way. And if you don't follow them on social media, I'd really highly encourage you to do it. But in terms of a collegiate esports program, if you see the Butler esports logo, they're the Butler Bulldogs, but they have this gamified version of the Bulldog logo that, it is very much tied to Butler. Yet it still gives the students who are specifically in this community a point of connection and something to be proud of. And then I think taking it a step further, and Eric, I'm sure you can speak to this more than I can. I think the other part of a collegiate brand identity that people have to think about is how you continue to, for lack of a better way to put it, humanize the participants and how you put the student faces out there, because so much of gaming can happen behind a computer and without pictures. Like that's how we differ from traditional sports, right? Like when basketball has a match, they'll show a clip and you can see the faces of the people. But like when our Rocket League team plays, if we show a Rocket League clip, it doesn't necessarily show the people behind it. But Butler's been doing a really great job in also pulling their student profiles forward to showcase who those students are and who's competing. And I think we're here going to talk a minute about audience, but I think that's an important part of this too, is to tell that story of who the people are, and not just that you're winning, but that you are doing it with students at the forefront. So, Eric, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more about what Butler's doing at all with that.
That was fantastic. I mean, perfect segue. So, no, fantastic points. And to be honest with you, that is what we've learned from our students. So when we were getting information from them, they wanted to be respected in this space. They wanted to have that affinity to Butler, but they didn't necessarily have that in traditional sports, right? And so we wanted to go where they are. We wanted to find the way to gamify and connect with them in the digital format. And so we used one of our partners, our university partners, Section 127 here in town, where they did the industry research, right? Like they used our brand guidelines and everything else and worked with our marketing team to really try to fit that mold. And when they created those designs, I mean, this one just stuck out and everybody was on board with it, from administration to our students. And when you have that, you just start to gain that excitement and that energy behind it. And so when you are getting in the apparel and in the digital acknowledgments for students, and I cannot take credit for that. Those students do such a fantastic job and being able to do promo and hype videos, as well as some of the different graphics you see on some of our social media. But they really are able to do that because the university got behind it from that brand component. And that really, as you mentioned, really excites the student to be able to create that type of graphics and affinity towards Butler that you're seeing only from the university, but also from our students in their own social capacities, right? They want to be tied to it and have their acknowledgement in that space.
Yeah. And that's the part I think that's so important to it too. Like that's how to get your university behind it. But you want to have something that is appealing enough for students in your identity, whether it's, posts, a logo, whatever it might be, that they're going to pick yours instead of designing their own. I think like that is something that as more and more universities start to institutionalize esports, it's something for us constantly to think about. And like, a lot, even at DePaul, and Kevin probably knows this well, a lot of our teams had individualized logos. They had something that somebody made in, Publisher 5 years ago, and they really like that. But what we've been working to do is to make ours more appealing, right? Like we want you to be as excited about being part of our brand, being part of our identity, being part of our promotion, that you're willing, to perhaps maybe give up that publisher logo. And our students aren't doing that. Our students, that is a terrible example and not reflective of DePaul at all. We have phenomenal graphic designers. So DePaul students, if you're watching, I hope you're not insulted, because I know you're not doing that. But other student orgs are, but not esports. But like we want them to adapt that, right? We want them to buy into it. But I think that, as we continue our conversation and pivot a little bit, I think we also have to talk a little bit about audience, right? Like we know that esports is trying to tell a story in a lot of different ways. We're trying to have our esports and gaming communities tell a story up to administration, and then we're trying to have a story that also goes to the students and student peers, but then also one that just goes to the general community. So I'm curious how you all, and Eric, maybe I'll start with you on this one, how you all have taken the time to learn about audience interests, and how you've adapted your marketing and promotion of your team or program based on who that audience is.
Yeah, absolutely. So any of those programs that are getting ready to start an esports program will not have the lack of feedback from passionate gamers or the community members in how you're setting up and operationalizing your program. I think the key is to not get overwhelmed with it. There are going to be a lot of ideas and interest out there to go different routes. I think is really important to frame it again towards those pillars of the university. However, when you're talking about how did we first start learning more about that, a lot of it was those interview related items. So I know Rebecca kind of talked a little bit about that as well. So we were doing the internal interviews. We actually had a consultant when we were looking at our next phase of our design of our facility space that set up all the interviews for not only internal constituents, but also on our community. So our professional esports team that's here in town, but also other professional sports franchises that are wanting to activate in esports. So learning what some of the achievables are in that space. Because you ask a student, they're not going to think that necessarily revenue generation is important. But when you start talking to administrators and you start talking to some of these external groups, that is extremely important. So how are we figuring out a system to be able to make sure that how we frame out either a facility or our online space or our digital platform, that we have those in mind as we're building it. And so not all of those are going to align when it comes to students and administration and whatnot. And that's sometimes the fun job of myself, is to try to bring that together and get that joint pathway to have that vision forward. But I will say that social media obviously provides you a huge avenue to gain some of that feedback. I know you guys have mentioned Reddit. We actually had an alum that put our logo and branding up there and had 126,000 upticks and 2,000 comments alone. So I think you can get vast feedback very quickly in this digital environment, specifically from the esports industry alone. I think I shared earlier too, we did a ton of different interviews. I mean, as you're starting a program, being on the phone constantly, and Corey, you know this, by having an esports collaborative, to be able to info share with the institutions that are either lagging or those that are moving faster, it kind of brings you together to be able to grow and be stronger together. I think that has helped all of our Big East institutions that have gone in this space. EGF being able to be a partner with a lot of institutions to be able to grow, and now with having the Board of Governors to be able to capture that. Really identifying strategic partners to tell your story for you too is important. So when I was going in front of our President's Cabinet, our Board of Trustees, and some of the other community officials that help support where this is going on Butler's campus, it was extremely important to have collaboration from not only areas on campus, but those in the community that could help advance what you're doing. When we talked about our 3 pillars, we talked about community, curriculum, and competition. So we're trying to make ours a little bit more externally focused and not just an internal, like in our union. It'd be an end-to-end pipeline. So developing, and I forget, I think it was Bill or Kevin that was sharing about being able to foster the youth in their facility spaces. And I think that's extremely important to make sure that we're storytelling for parents to talk about career opportunities that might not be being a pro esport player, but the production, the broadcasting components and whatnot that are tied to this space. And I think it was really important for us to have that collaboration to help tell those stories.
Courtney, I could jump in and add a couple of things here. I, first of all, have to give you credit, because as we've been doing so much research over the past few months about where the GameHERS could fit into the college esports world, you actually have been one of the people who's given us so much advice, and it's on this topic of audience. And Eric, you were saying a lot of this same stuff, but when we think about kind of like I was saying before, of course, everybody thinks that women should have equal opportunities in gaming and that they're half of the gamers in the world, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's a different conversation for each school because schools are all set up differently. It's a different conversation when we're talking to administrators because of some of the things you just mentioned, Eric. And so what we think of is, what do we bring to the table? We bring career opportunities, professional development, all this, topics that women may want to talk about that are specific to them in gaming. But also we bring leadership positions and collaboration and the things that are important to administrators may be important to students. And so finding the ones that are the same, I think, is always helpful. And they may not. And so then you can separate the message a little depending on who you're messaging. And I think also Eric mentioned this as well, but figuring out who to partner with strategically is also super important. So figuring out your audience and figuring out which audience it is, I think, is what I would take away from this. And then finally, creating a turnkey solution to make it as easy as possible for whoever you're talking to get to the next step that you want to get to. And I can't actually say that we're there yet. We're in that process right now, but that's what has seemed to be the most successful in terms of moving conversations forward.
I can give a couple cents worth. So being at a small university, we are trying to use esports, as I'm sure many colleges are, as a recruitment tool, right? To try to entice students to come to Niagara. So out of every side of my mouth, I'm attending admissions events, virtual open houses, all those type of things, adapting some of our messaging on social media to prospective students, and also community members to make sure that we're engaging with them. I loved your comment, Rebecca, about leadership. You're talking to the campus administrator who, that's what I try to do every day is help students establish those leadership positions and grow and develop as leaders. For somebody who just wants to play Rocket League, maybe that's what they're thinking, but first semester of freshman year, something like that. But that can grow and develop. And so certainly that's a big component for us. And talking with our campus administrators about that, because, and we mentioned it kind of in the brand identity earlier, our administrators, and me included, we don't really care necessarily if we win or lose matches. I'm a competitive person, so I want to win, but being there and being a good representation of our university is first and foremost important. So that's one of our big messages is we care that you're there, we're glad that you're there, and now represent Niagara well, and that leans back to putting the swag on, put on your jersey, put on your hoodie, whatever Niagara esports apparel you have, because it's much more than you just playing a title, a match against, it's you going up against, representing Niagara, representing a school, going against another university. This is top level stuff that you really need to take your, not only conduct, but just how you represent yourself to the next level.
Yeah, Bill, you brought up a really great point, and kind of just, I think a big piece is really understanding your end goal, and really understanding like the needs of what the program, at the beginning is really meant for, right? Because a lot of, universities could be focused on competition, or a lot of universities could be focused on, community, or is it recruiting people into the, into your university, or is it trying to retain students from year to year? And so that's a big piece. And I know for, especially at DePaul and kind of making sure that we were always, putting one step forward and making sure that all that messaging and knowing our audience for those specific categories is really key, right? If we want to retain more students, how do we keep growing the community? How do we keep them super engaged internally? And then, focus our attention into that audience. If you're trying to, recruit people and new people into the program, how do you start, marketing to parents and educating more and providing more of that content? And then on the flip side, if you're sticking with the competitive route, how do you really showcase all your competitive programs? It's all different types of, avenues of marketing for different audiences. And I think a big piece is just really understanding the end goal. And for us at DePaul Esports, it was really trying to hone in and foster a really nice community that really helps uplift all the competitive side as well. And so it's kind of that full 360 of all the different pillars that I think everyone has kind of mentioned here is one helps the other in the end, but kind of understanding that initial audience in the beginning can really help propel you forward.
Yeah, and I think speaking to that, Kevin, the other thing that I think about with audiences too oftentimes is the breadth and depth of engagement that you need with different audiences is also different. At DePaul, like we need a lot of engagement for our students, right? Like we make announcements about every match that's upcoming and what's going out there. But when it comes time for my audience of administrators or parents or prospective students, like for prospective students, we have a really polished video that one of our student team has been making that talks about our gaming center and highlights some core elements. It's 1 5-minute video that we use over and over. And like for administrators, we have some video stories where people talk about the importance of or like the value of getting involved in like our Overwatch team and Rocket League team. And it's been interesting, particularly for those videos. I hear from university administrators how essential those videos are. And they feature 3 students, but they talk about why this community matters to them, and it puts that face to it. And it's really interesting because I've talked to some of the students and they're like, well, we don't think we need that video. And I'm like, the video's not for you. Like, I need it to tell this other story. And I think that's what sometimes, especially for programs, and I think a lot of programs in esports are heavily relying on students right now, which is spectacular and phenomenal. But we need some of that content, and we need help from students to propel that story. And it's not just the really like the match announcements and the wins and all of that. It's this varied story at a lot of different levels.
Courtney, just one more thing I want to add. And again, this was something you helped us kind of devise, but we have a very short little deck that outlines, like a PowerPoint pitch deck that outlines what the GameHERS would be on a college university. And literally the 3 pages are, what is the GameHERS? Why would a university want the GameHERS? And if you want the GameHERS, what are the next steps? Mm-hmm. And my answer for that is, it's mostly administrators, because it has to be administrators first and then students, but that's it. Those are the answers to the questions that need to be answered. So thank you for your advice on that. And it's so far seems to be working pretty well.
Well, and that slide deck is a spectacular example. I think every single college program should have that slide deck. And we're not talking like a 30-40 thing of like, here's our win-loss record for, like, it's kind of like Bill said, like when we have to tell a story, they're not saying, so tell me what your win percentage was. No, they're telling us, they're asking like, how are students engaged? Some schools may be asking like what the win-loss record is, but most people are asking questions about how are they connecting? What's the community look like, especially in the pandemic right now? So having like a really well-made slide deck can go so far. And we have one of those at DePaul, and I send it out to partners, I send it to administrators, but I constantly am updating it to make sure that it has the most up-to-date data. But it's part of that helpful story as well. And you can use the information in a whole lot of different ways.
Yeah, the community is really the big word. I'm finding I'm saying myself again and again. I'm so glad that I've been introduced to Discord through the last couple of years, right? And just to see how our students interact, meet there. And yeah, it's esports most of the time, but it goes into their academics, just every aspect of student life that you can think of. So it's a lot more than just esports. So it's all about that positive community experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it looks like we've got a comment from one of our viewers right now. I actually think this is Michelle King over at William & Mary asking about the slide deck being shared somewhere for all to access. And, I think that is really critical, right? It's not only having it, but it's about reinventing and making it easy for people to access, right? So is it on your website? Is it on your social media? Do you do a video about it? What do those things look like so that you can make this content easily and accessible? But this, kind of, I think, transitions to at least our 4th plan topic. And I know we've got some questions in the chat. And I would say, if anyone else is watching, if you have more questions, feel free again to post them in those comments. But as we head towards the tail end I want to talk a little bit about day-to-day management and what that looks like. I think that's one of the ways that people sometimes get overwhelmed. But Bill, perhaps you can start with this one. But I'm curious if you can share some of the tips and tricks in terms of how you are managing your program in the day-to-day.
Sure.
For specifically around marketing.
Yeah, I encourage all of our groups out there, and especially to our students that are watching today, to establish a really close, good working relationship with your advisor, your student activities area, student life involvement, or whatever they call it at your university. But having a good relationship with that department, that office, they can be your biggest cheerleader. And it's for here at Niagara, like I've kind of mentioned, it's a two-way relationship. I am learning more from them than I'm giving to them. But I think what I am giving to them is providing some of that leadership development and just the general accountability and the learning that needs to take place outside of the actual gaming of the title. And that definitely involves the marketing piece. Coming up with a good plan, as we've talked about today, of how you're marketing your program, how you're marketing your matches, community service. We haven't really talked about that, but there's that component to esports as well. And then for us, taking that to the next level, establishing a great relationship with your public relations person or area or department, as well as good campus administrators. We're luckily we have that down pat here at Niagara, where when our teams are involved in most recently the Vincentian Cup that we did with DePaul and St. John's, we were able to spread some really great messaging locally in this area, even to the Buffalo media about that event, and just highlighting our students and our competition. But then capitalizing on the connection is what I would say, and that it is what I just said before about the connection to your students, to those who are gaming with you. And that it is not just about esports, although that's the first priority, but it's that positive community experience.
Courtney, I actually have a question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of tips and tricks, I like to practice what I preach. And the gamers, like I started from the beginning, the best way for us to grow and learn is to learn from the people around us. So since I'm sitting here on a panel with all these awesome people from other universities, I wondered if some of the other panelists would be open to telling me what you think the biggest unmet need of women who game on your campuses is. Because if you could weigh into that at all, it would help us develop what we could offer.
Well, I'm not a formal panelist, but I have an answer for that one. For DePaul, one of the things that's interesting about our community, when you look at our community demographics and breakdown, we have 1,300 community members, about 10-15% of those are competitive. But if you look at the gender breakdown, it's around 70% men and 30% women. The thing that is interesting, particularly when our gaming center is open, we're closed right now for the pandemic. But the thing that's interesting is women come back at a higher rate of return than men do. But I think it's oftentimes harder for women to find that entry point and that pipeline and feel that the door is open and that they know that it's there. So for me, I think and I think this goes to like branding and messaging. I think that there is a need for people to see themselves, see their potential place in a community. Whether they are women, whether they're historically marginalized communities, people of color, that they can see themselves in this space, whether that be through your marketing message, through what your team looks like. I think that is an area of great need. And it's not just to see it, but it's to back it up with the actual space then. I think that's one place just the collegiate industry can grow and expand generally. It's one thing for us to showcase, the women and the people, like people on the margins that we have, but we've got to back it up with actual systems of support. So, and I think that's where it comes into like both your program development, and actually we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a later EGF Leads topic as well. But I think that's one area that we need to grow and expand on.
No, I thank you for that feedback. And why I was asking is because this is exactly the kind of thing that we're trying to build our program to be able to be helpful with. And so we're always asking, where is help actually needed? Because that's where hopefully we can come in. So thank you for that, Courtney.
Rebecca, I would echo exactly what Courtney's sharing. I think you don't realize how much you are doing just in creating the awareness aspect of it, because and Courtney kind of talked about the facility component. It was so key for us to get a facility space so we could see who was actually utilizing our gaming club, as well as being able to be an integral part of even the ancillary parts, right? Production components and everything else tied to it. And one of the things that we, really were hesitant on too, is that we didn't want, when we have females involved, is that we did not want to feel forceful into the activation in the space. I think that sometimes can come uncomfortable. And so we want to make sure that we're fostering an environment that they know that we support, that we know that there is not the toxic environment that sometimes arises around gaming, whether it's in virtual format or in the facility space. And so with more awareness, tying in our diversity center, much like what Courtney was talking about, and actually your slide deck prompted discussion and hopefully opportunity for that growth on our campus. So I think you're doing a fantastic job. I think it's sometimes going to be a slow roll in this space just because of the so many hats that we are wearing. And then it takes sometimes the student leadership to say, we are going to come together. We are going to support this, because university folks like myself that want to push it forward need some of that grassroots from some of those female participants as well.
Yeah, thank you for that, Eric. And we have realized that. And I know sort of academia moves a little slower anyway, it seems, in terms of decision making than some other industries, but that's okay. We're here for the long haul. And like I said before, we exist purely to sort of facilitate the exact things that we're talking about here. And so thanks for that feedback. It's really helpful.
I'd love to be able to offer my 2 cents on kind of Rebecca, your question as well, and it piggybacks off of everything that Courtney and Eric have just mentioned. But I think a big thing when we were kind of building all of our communities together, especially from like the student side, is how do we help kind of make everything a little bit more accessible for everybody. And right now in gaming, especially around different how your space is built, or how your brand and your identity is kind of shown, is there's high barriers to entry into esports organizations, into kind of that club mentality for a lot of different groups, right? It feels for a lot of different organizations that it's very competitive focused, or it's very high end focused, which Courtney mentioned 10% or 15% of the whole population is the competitive side for DePaul. And so it's how do you make a space that the rest of the participants feel is something where they can gravitate towards and be able to walk in and feel comfortable, because that's a big piece is how do you just walk into a space, that's a gaming space. Maybe you love gaming, but you might not be the competitive side. And so it might be, even for me, especially, I'm not, on the competitive side. And so like walking into those competitive spaces is still daunting, because you're walking in, you're like, okay, who do I ask for help? Is there someone that I can actually ask here? And so really, kind of putting those pieces forward and always understanding that, got to break down a lot of those barriers to entry. It can't be, one of those pieces where it's a super high barrier.
So we've got a couple minutes here left of our panel, and I wanted to pull in a couple questions from the audience. So the first one here looks like it's from Jay Gruppo. Do each of the schools represented on the panel have academic programs tied to esports, game design, etc.? If so, how are those tied into your efforts?
So let me start, because my answer is pretty easy. No. At Niagara, we don't have a direct major or minor as of today, February 3rd, 2021. And I feel like that has been a hindrance for us, in attracting students, in just having another resource on campus. So it's something that we've started to engage in some conversations about. And if anything, it's already helped help us engage in some relationships with some of our faculty on campus. So we're looking forward to exploring that more, because that is a very important component.
I'm happy to go next. At Butler, we do not yet. We have faculty that are actually leading that proposal, and it's actually going up, I think, this coming month. So there is some excitement behind it. While we have a number of faculty that are tied into elements of esports, it might not be directed into the actual minor major title, and that we've tried to make that more holistic so that those folks that are involved with our esports program are aware of those different tie-ins, whether it's gamification of education, whether it's storytelling in esports. But our College of Communication is really leading the charge about developing that curriculum. So stay tuned. Hope to have some news out on that before too long.
Yeah, it's funny. As everyone's responding here, I feel like everyone's saying not yet, and there's like a ... right after that, right? Like because DePaul's in the same boat. We have some classes that are starting to emerge this year that have esports as one of the core components for it. So we actually have a class out of our College of Business that is going to be about the business of esports. And then we have at DePaul, we have a world-class College of Computing and Digital Media. So game design is very much part of our culture and in what a lot of our students are already doing and studying. But I think one of the most exciting academic offerings that we have this year, we actually have part of our program, we have an offering called D-Sports, DE Sports, kind of like DePaul, D-Sports, but it's a high school curriculum program where students register for this class, and they essentially serve as mentors for Chicago Public Schools esports programs. So they're connecting with kids in CPS on a regular basis, helping them learn the ins and outs of gaming, teamwork, all of those different components. So I think I hear a lot about the program. It's not part of my day-to-day work and efforts. It's part of the larger esports offerings at the university. But we're definitely starting to see it bubble up throughout our academia. And I think we are on the edge of stringing these experiences together into either a minor or a major or a certificate program. We've had lots of discussion about that. Yeah, and then our next question here is heading back towards conversations about audience. So how do you reach your student audience outside of socials? For my campus, very few students read the biweekly student email newsletter. And in a pandemic, it doesn't seem practical to put up flyers.
So I got a good old school and a new school answer for that one. The old school answer is word of mouth, right? And I think even in the pandemic, students are talking with each other, whether that's text or voice chats or, anything, all the above. So that is definitely one way. And then the newer, I want to say newest, but newer school answer is Discord. So if a student can, I don't know if it's in an email or how they see it, but they see the link for the Discord and joining that Discord channel that programs have, that is sort of opens the door to further connection. So you got old school and new school there.
I'm happy to add on to that. So at Butler, we've really tried to foster some of the events that our club program can really foster in. And as Bill talked about, the students share. They talk to each other in a number of different ways, and they can create their own avenues for getting that word out. We partnered with our rec program to offer intramurals, and then also with our admissions team, so that when anybody creates a new admissions application, that we're gathering that before they even come to our campus. So what it provides us is the bandwidth to be able to share our information out with them upon coming on our campus. And be able to start building that base. But the students at Butler do a fantastic job of being able to cultivate their Discord, much like what Bill was talking about.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to piggyback on both these answers here, as being one of like the core ways that we were able to really increase, kind of like the student involvement and bring new students in was to really drive them into one location. So having all the same, that messaging that you're sending out, no matter where you're doing it, but driving them into one centralized location, which, for us for a long time was the main Discord within like the DePaul esports community, which allowed everybody to kind of funnel into one area. For them to be able to find, different communities within there, or also have events. Another piece is, making sure that you're working with, I would say, like, if you have sponsors or anything of that nature, working with sponsors to be able to provide that type of, if you have an event, have prizing. The gaming community is notorious for always loving to have, some sort of end goal in terms of prizing or something to strive for. And we found that was, super beneficial in working with, sponsors and in creating that type of environment where you can show up. Yes, we'll have a really great event, but at the same time, there's something that at the end you could win, or you could strive to get in the end. And so that also helped kind of increase the amount of inbound students coming in.
And I think, Courtney, I'll just weigh in here, even though we're not on a college campus in the same capacity as I think the question was actually asking. As the GameHERS gets a little bit more down the road, we are going to have an app that connects women who game to each other, and also hopefully, great connections with all the schools. And so we just hope that eventually we can be somebody who provides opportunities to reach students too in a very new kind of cutting edge way.
Well, great. Well, panelists, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I know I learned a little bit, and I hope our viewers did as well. So for those of you watching, as a reminder, this is part of our newly launched EGF Leads series. So for the next 8-9 weeks, we will be here Wednesdays at 2:00 Eastern Time, talking about a myriad of different topics. So next week on the 10th, we're going to be talking about mental health and esports. So be sure to tune in for that conversation. But until then, we hope you all stay safe and well. But we will talk to you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.